Welcome everyone to another Total War Warhammer 2 online multiplayer replay. Today, thanks to Cool Umbrella sending in the replay, we have a crazy close Tomb Kings vs Skaven battle. Literally fought to the very last Skaven or skeleton standing. Cool Umbrella is taking a full stack 20 unit army with a mixture of skeletons, spears, swords and horsemen. Basically using the numbers of the skeleton hordes to overwhelm or at least counter the Skaven chaff, and using the numbers advantage on the skeleton horses, the mobility there, to swarm the backlines. And for the leadership core as well as the single entities, we have a couple Tomb Scorpions with some leftover funds upgrades, and also Necrotag on his chariot. And leading the army, we have Cetra the Imperishable, bringing a bunch of his abilities and spells, one of which is the incantation of Cursed Blades, providing extra damage buff as well as anti-large. Now for the Skaven army, Cool Umbrella's opponent's Kraken is bringing a rather narrow build with only 3 Clan Rats for chaff. The rest are rather elite with the Clan Vulcan tail slashes. With fire damage and better melee stats, they should do okay against Tomb Kings, who does have fire weaknesses. And the fire resistance will help them tank out damage from Cetra's chariot. At the back, we have some Warlock Giselles. These guys will be responsible for sniping out the constructs of the Tomb Kings, and even further back, Red Ogres to countercharge and pin down mobility. We also have some extra weapon teams. The Warp Grinders would be pretty useful to pin down enemy mobility as they charge into the backline, with their ability the Seismic Snare, vulnerable to countercharges and infantry attacks. Also, the Warp Quake not only slows down enemy but also do area of effect damage directly to any enemy units. Probably will be good against skeleton blobs. Now for the elite troops that will be carrying the army, we have the Blightscab Plate Pack, the Regiment of Renowned Censer Bearers. They are a rather rare unit to see on the battlefield, honestly, due to them being really squishy and not exactly good against any matchup. However, their ability, the Rebel Rouse, would be pretty useful up against Tomb Kings with that immune to psychology buff to units around him. The cowardly Skaven units will be holding much longer in combat by ignoring the fear and terror brought by so many Tomb Kings units on the battlefield. Of course, these Censer Bearers alone is not enough. We also have the Council God, Unbreakable Skavens. They will be the sturdy backbone of this whole army, responsible for holding the line against whatever horrors that the Tomb Kings have brought. And leadership, we have a Plague Priest bringing in Pestilent Breath, Withering, as well as a Vermintide Summons. Also, Throt the Unclean is leading the army due to the fact that he does have the very convenient creature killer there, providing bonus versus sludge and immune to psychology, helping the Skavens to hold longer in front of Tomb King's monsters, helping them to dish out more damage against the Tomb King's monsters, cavalry as well as chariots. And that's basically it for army builds. Let's get the battle going and see what happens. The battle begins with the Warlock Giselles pushing forward, trying to get in range and shoot at these single entities. Having no active healing whatsoever, these single entities with large hitbox will be very susceptible to these armor-piercing sniper rifles. So the Tomb Kings player will be pulling back the single entities a bit. Instead, they will push forward the skeleton hordes to pressure the Skaven frontline, while keeping the precious single entities away from the attention of the Warlock Giselles. On the flanks, Carrions and skeleton horses will also be moving forward, now trying to encircle this entire Skaven formation. Given how narrow this Skaven build is, they might very well succeed in finding gaps and holes into the backlines. To minimalize the mobility threat, Warlock Giselles already focusing down some of the mobility. These Skaven weapons team will need to expand as much ammo as possible before they are eventually shut down by the Tomb Kings. However, the Carrions will be moving in, probably will drop down to silence these Warlock Giselles right about now, as they will be dragged into melee combat, unable to fire despite having heavy armor to mitigate damage from the Carrions. So, in response, the Skavens pull in some Clan Rat summons as well as the Council God. The Plague Priest on the Plague Furnace also rush in along with the help of some pit fighters of Hell's Deep, almost gone for the Lord of the Rings geographical term there. Really, the naming sometimes are confusing. But right now, the Carrions are getting destroyed in combat. One thing of note that is Cool Umbrella is leaving some of his Carrions in reserve in the skies, throwing the Carrions piecemeal, preventing the Skavens from being able to kill them all at the same time. The Carrions' purpose is not to kill the Warlock Giselles, but to silence them. So they will drop down one after the other to keep the Warlock Giselles occupied as long as possible. And in the front line, the skeleton spears and warriors are already overloading the clan rats with the help of some tomb scorpions. Over here on this flank, some of the skeletons are being cleaned up, especially these horsemen being subjected to creature killer on these clan Vulcan tail slashes, as well as Throt the Unclean himself. These skeleton horses simply stand no chance in the fight. Things are looking a bit better for the Tomb Kings on the other side, as Cetra the Imperishable and Necrotag are able to roll over these Blight Scabs Plague Pack. The minimal armor on these Plague Monk Sensor Bearers really do them no favor against the chariots. However, the middle fight is going pretty well for the Skaven actually. The Council Guard was staying in there, securing the Warlock Jezzails against the Skeleton Spears. Pit fighters are holding down the Tomb Scorpions, but as I said, that more skeleton horsemen pours in and get on top on the Warlock Jezzails. These Warlock Jezzails are routed by the skeleton horsemen. These ones are soon to be gone as well, and Skaven loses all their firepower. The Skavens, going for a rather narrow army build, simply do not have enough chaff to cover all the flanks on their army. So once the Red Ogres move in to deal with the chariots and monsters of the Tomb Kings, the Warlock Jezzails are basically free for grabs for the skeleton horses. However, this is still anybody's game, with the balance of power suggesting that both players are on a fairly even ground, as the pit fighters are now pinning in some Ushabti, or rather being pinned down by Ushabti. Throt the Unclean charging into combat, trying to snipe out the Tomb Scorpion with the help of the Plague Priest as well as some Council Guard support, capitalizing on the anti-large attack. While Cetra the Imperishable will be routing all these clan rats, including the clan Vulcan's tail slashers. More clan rat summons are dropped to bog down the chariots and single entities, isolating them from the Tomb Scorpions, who is now surrounded by elite Skavens. Some skeleton horses trying to support, but they are already crumbling, soon to be gone from the battlefield. Now, Throt the Unclean charging to combat against Cetra the Imperishable, but Nero's incantation of protection, providing that key physical resistance for Cetra there, help him to tank out quite some damage, as Throt the Unclean does not do magic damage. Seeing now that he can assassinate Cetra with the physical resistance buff, Throt extracts himself from combat and charges straight into the weakened Tomb Scorpion. With multiple armor-piercing single entities and infantry support, the Tomb Scorpion will be going down soon. And we have a look at the front line. The Blight Scabs Plague Pack did quite a lot of kills there. 188, clear out a lot of chaff, not a lot of value, but they did an okay job in thinning out the skeleton infantry horde. Not exactly a cost-effective trade, but it does give a better chance for the remaining Skavens to fight against the Tomb Kings. Now Cetra the Imperishable charging in again, trying to go for the kill on Throt the Unclean here. Dropping another spell, buffing himself up with Jav's incantation of Cursed Blades, he is receiving a noticeable boost in weapon damage. In addition, being the overcast version, it has an extra bonus versus large effect, giving Cetra an edge in combat against Throt. Coupled with fire damage and magical damage on the Chariot of the Gods, he is ignoring the physical resistance of Throt the Unclean and capitalizing on the fire weakness, and Throt the Unclean will be routed despite popping Creature Killer to provide her immune to psychology. Now let's have a look at the overall battle. The mobility of the Tomb Kings is basically all gone. There are some skeleton warriors still in reserve or maybe chasing off routing units and went all away and forgotten. They will be slowly marching into combat. While in the front line, the Blight Scabs Plague Pack charging into the rear of this skeleton blob, cleaning up a whole bunch of skeleton spears and whatnot, but the Plague Priest is going down. All that's holding are some Council Guard in here, fixating this front line here. The Warp Grinders have been fighting in the blob for the whole time, constantly spamming its abilities, doing some nice AoE damage. Though being Skaven's weapons team, they can only hold so long in melee combat, and now they will be routed. While some returning Clan Vulcan's Tail Slasher will be charging into combat again, trying to surround these single entities of the Tomb Kings. In response, the Tomb Kings will be pulling out Cetra from combat, now going straight after Throt the Unclean. Same goes for the other single entities, and if I remember correctly, the rules basically says that single entities can switch targets exactly once in melee combat. After that, they'll have to remain in combat until either side dies or breaks. And now the final showdown between Throt and Cetra will conclude. Cetra, despite being a powerful melee combatant and a strong damage dealer, he's lacking in healing and damage mitigation, so Throt being able to heal barely pulls out on top. But still, things are not exactly decisive just yet, as the balance of power is still extremely close. For the Skavens, Throt is wavering, having his leadership lowered, taking so much damage and reaching healing cap, while the Tomb Kings here still having one Tomb Scorpion here and the Necrotact. And also a tactical reserve, totally not forgotten skeleton warriors saturating on top of all these remaining Skaven units, actually beating back Throt the Unclean with a combination of Necrotact and Tomb Scorpion. Throt the Unclean being so beat up simply can't fight two single entities at once. In the far side, we do have some regrouped Plague Priest and Blight Scab's Plague Pack here returning to the fray, trying to protect their Liege Lord once more. All that's left, honestly, is rather flimsy on the Skaven end, with only some Council Guard holding back the tide of Skeleton Warriors who are actually debilitated after the long march. But now a clutch Clanrat summon in back pocket here, separating the Necrotact, who went quite a bit ahead of himself there, recklessly chasing after Throt and charging straight into combat, isolating himself against Throt the Unclean, taking some massive hits from that anti-large, especially with the Creature Killer active. The Tomb Scorpion slays and destroys the Plague Furnace, but the Necrotact is definitely going down soon, especially with Throt hot on his tail. And the Blight Scab's Plague Pack as well as the Clanrat surrounding the Tomb Scorpion actually breaks it, and Throt kills the last remaining single entity for the Tomb Kings, the Necrotact. But then Throt shattered, leaving only the Council Guard remaining in the fight. Some Clanrats are still there, but they are summons and they will be disappearing soon, while the Blight Scab Plague Pack, despite still being on the battlefield, they're extremely tattered. I doubt they can get any damage done even if they get into melee combat. So now it is the final showdown, the battle between Unbreakable and Unbreakable. 25 Council Guard versus 100 Skeleton Warriors. They need to kill at least 4 Skeleton Warriors each to actually make their cost worth it, but can they do it? Let's have a fast forward here as things will be taking quite some time, while the Blight Scab Plague Pack attempting to go for a flanking maneuver, unfortunately routed as their leadership no longer holds up under the presence of the healthier Skeleton Warriors. And now as the last of the Skeletons and Skavens are fighting in the pitched battle, let us go for an even faster fast forward as the battle will take quite some time. As the Council Guard fighting shoulder to shoulder, slowly hacking away at the Skeleton Warriors, but doesn't seem to be quite enough as their numbers slowly dwindle and the halberd phalanx they form is slowly breaking apart, exposing their comrades' flank to the opposing Skeleton Warriors. They will be falling one after the other. HP slowly runs out, not even their melee stats can really save them here. Now down to the last few Skaven, while the Skeletons still have over 30 models left. The Council Guard will be going down. Literally fought to the last man, Unbreakable versus Unbreakable. Who would have thought a tactical reserve / forgotten unit of Skeleton Warriors would win the day for the Tomb Kings? Now before we go into the army performances, just want to say a big thanks to Cool Umbrella and Kraken for bringing in such an amazing game, so close of a finish right there. Things could have really gone either way. Also big thanks to Cool Umbrella for sending in so many replays recently, sharing us a lot of fun battles, generously giving this channel a lot of extra content. And viewers, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you do, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to get notified every time I upload a new video. They will be ranging from Total War Warhammer 2 online multiplayer replays, tips and strategies for online multiplayer, and also wild army builds. And if you have any replays that you want me to cast them, feel free to send your replays in through my Discord or an email with the replay file attached. Now for the army performances, for the Tomb Kings led by Cool Umbrella, the infantry, other than this one remaining Skeleton Warrior unit that was able to clutch the combat, the rest of them basically died as all Skeleton chaff do. Not really much can be said about them. Same goes for the Skeleton Horses. Actually these two units did okay, as they were able to run down a bunch of Warlock Jezzails. Carrions, they are not exactly a damage dealing unit. Their main purpose is to just dive down, tie down the Warlock Jezzails in melee combat, and whatever artillery that the Skaven brought. In the end, that's exactly what they did. By sending in these carrions one by one, Cool Umbrella was able to prolong the melee combat in the backlines, continuously silencing the Warlock Jezzails, and in the end, buy time for the rest of the mobility to get in place and shut down the firepower once and for all. Now let's go for the powerhouses of this game. We have the Tomb Scorpions here. One of them died quite early, however the other one survived till the end game, was able to hunt down one of the Plague Priest, and also did some really good damage against Throt the Unclean, getting almost 2000 gold value. Very impressive stuff. Now for the leadership, the Necrotech did some really good work on the chariot, as the Skavens, mostly being infantry and chav, they were rather susceptible to these kind of high mass chariot units. And Cetra the Imperishable, 4,265 damage. Absolutely amazing. Single-handedly wiped out almost half of the Skaven army, constantly running down a bunch of Skaven chav, and also did some really good damage against Throt the Unclean, forcing Throt to hit the heal cap, basically killing Throt the Unclean 1.5 times. As I said before, the flaming magic attack on the chariot, as well as the anti-large from the cursed blade, really helped him to dish out the pain against Throt the Unclean, given Throt's physical resistance and regeneration, causing him to be susceptible to fire damage and magic damage. Now for the Skaven army, the Skaven chav are Skaven chav after all, so not much can be said. The Clan Vulcan Tail Slasher did okay, especially they were able to shut down some of the skeleton horsemen, given the creature killer buff. And at the back we have the Warp Grinders not doing a lot of damage actually, despite constantly spamming their buffs, the Seismic Waves and the Warp Grinder area of effect damage. Now the damage dealers, we have the Blight Scab's Plague Pack there. They cost a lot, so they didn't really earn back their own value, only doing 1,155 damage. However, almost 230 kills there, was able to thin out a lot of these skeleton hordes, giving the remaining Skaven armies a little bit better of a fighting chance. And then we have the Regiment of Renowned Storm Vermin, the Council God, doing almost 2,000 damage, 143 kills. These guys, unbreakable, stood their ground like a Swiss Guard in the last stand, holding valiantly against whatever horror that the Tomb Kings brought. Literally fighting down to the last man, almost able to pull out a victory, if not for the skeleton warriors from Cool Umbrella there. Their anti-large armor-piercing attacks combined with their decent melee stats also helped them to grind down a bunch of the monsters and chariots from the Tomb Kings. Unfortunately for the Skaven, the Warlock Jezzails, despite costing so much, did barely any damage to the Tomb Kings. They were not able to have a lot of expensive targets to shoot at. The Tomb Scorpions and the chariots were hanging back, avoiding that Warlock Jezzail fire, and after they got shut down by the Carrions, they were unable to fire again, as they were caught in combat by more and more skeleton units, including the Horsemen. The Red Ogres didn't really do too well here. They were unable to hold themselves against the Skeleton Spear hordes, Cetra the Imperishable, as well as a bunch of Tomb Scorpions. They are decent against counter-charging something like, say, Horsemen, but against something scarier, their low leadership doesn't really help them here. Now, Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep did a little bit better and do more damage. Still, Cetra on his chariot was able to absolutely destroy them. For the leadership, we have the Plague Priest here doing quite a bit of damage on his Plague Furnace. 1,700 damage, not too bad. Especially given that he also dropped down a whole bunch of Clan Rat summons, providing a lot of utility in battle, including that one clutch Rat summon there, isolating the Necrotech and the Tomb Scorpion, allowing Throt the Unclean to focus down the Necrotech, and the Blight Scab Plague Pack to take apart the Tomb Scorpion. Now, Throt the Unclean, 2,300 damage, not bad. However, the damage from Cetra the Imperishable is just too much for even his healing to deal with. In the end, he was severely weakened, unable to carry the game like he usually able to do so. So for a bit of a quick summary for this match, this game really came down to that surprise reserve of the Skeleton Warriors. Maybe Cool Umbrella forgot about the Skeleton Warriors, or maybe it was an intentional tactical reserve, though I do incline to think that it is the former. A lucky accident that helped Cool Umbrella to gain an edge in the endgame. And that came down so clutch that if the Blight Scab's Plague Pack held a little longer, able to charge into the rear of the Skeleton Warriors, or the Skeleton Warriors being thrown into combat at the early stage and being tattered in the late game, things would have gone really different. Skaven could have won this game. However, it seems that the odds are in Cool Umbrella's favor today, and he will be taking this Pyrrhic victory, barely clinging on to that victory with that one remaining skeleton unit with less than 30 models left. And that's basically it for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.